Welcome to this meeting of the Assembly Committee on Education for the 2023 legislative session. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson. Present. Assemblyman De Silva.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hanson. Assemblywoman Hardy. Assemblyman Koenig.
Here.
Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Assemblywoman Mosca.
Here.
Assemblywoman Taylor.
I'm present.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Here.
Chair Bilbray Axelrod.
Here, and please mark Assemblywoman Hardy and Hanson present when they arrive. They are meeting with the governor, but it's funny because Assemblywoman Hanson told me she got called to the principal's office, and she has so many kids. I was like, oh no, that's right. So they'll be here as soon as they are done with the governor. We do have a quorum. Welcome to the audience in Carson City and those joining by video. And is there anyone in Vegas? Well, they might come in later, so welcome as well. And those listening over the internet, I'd like to recognize this week as National School Counseling Week. Thank you for all you do to our school counselors. Such important work, especially with the pandemic. Kids are going through a lot, and mental health is definitely top of mind for us. So thank you for your hard work, and we celebrate you. Just some housekeeping stuff. Make sure your phone is on silent. If you wish to testify, please sign in. I think most of you did, and provide a business card to my our committee secretary. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state your name, affiliation, if anything, for the record. Then turn the microphone off when you're done speaking. If any of you have handouts, then we should have 20 hard copies for members of the public. Electronic copies should have been submitted to our committee manager by 1:30 p.m. yesterday for members of the committee. To that end, I know we have some copyright issues with one of the slides, so you might be, I don't know how exactly how it's going to work, but there will be one slide that we can't not broadcast because we don't have copyright to the pictures that are in it. Committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and other documentations. Please do not view this as a sign of disrespect or inattention. With that, we will get started. Today, we are going to hear 3 presentations. We'll hear from the school district on their Invest presentation, and I just have to, it's so clever that it's Invest with a capital NV. Isn't that cute? The Department of Education for a State of Education presentation, and the State Public Charter School Authority with an overview of their organization and its schools. So first we have the INVEST presentation. To present, we have Jesus Jara. If you're wondering why it's Jesus Jara, he can explain that. I was always interested. Clark County School District Superintendent and Nevada Association of School Superintendent President. We also have Pam Teal from Lincoln County School District Superintendent and NASS Vice President, and Keith Lewis, Douglas County School District Superintendent and NASS Secretary Treasurer. Is it NASS or NASS? NASS. All right, so you can do either. All right, I covered it all then. Please come up and get started. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. Jesus Jara, for the record. Do you want me to explain as to the why now for the members of the Assembly and the committee? I can. Well, my dad, when we moved to America when I was from Venezuela, he said the J it's a hard J, Jara. So I'm the only one in the house with, obviously, Jesus. So I can't go Jesus Jara, so I go Jesus Jara. My brothers and sisters got away with it, but that's the reason as to the Jesus Jara. So I tried to change it, it didn't work. So here we go. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Assembly, Superintendent Jesus Jara from Clark County, but here representing NASS. As the president this year, I have the honor to work with 17 phenomenal superintendents across this great state of Nevada and the state charter authority as well. We meet monthly. So what we all agree across this great state of Nevada that, and we are unified as I would say 99.9% of the time, that we will continue to advocate for optimal funding of our students. In 2022, the legislatively created Commission on School Funding identified the abysmal funding of our public schools and also once again declared it willfully inadequate. We've done report after report, and we continue to come with the same results. While we feel, I want to be very clear, that we all feel that our children are not failing as you read in the news. Our children are not failing. The state is failing our children. Historically, the underfunding of education has led to chronic underperforming on state and national assessments. So if we are going to improve, as we are, made some commitments, and we have seen improvements in coming out of COVID across all 17 school district and the state charter authority, we must continue to invest optimally to get optimal results. So as we continue to move forward and continue to support the pay for our educators, as we value their skills, we hold everybody accountable from the state all the way down to the classroom and respect the profession as it should be. And we look at funding education so it's a great equalizer that it's meant to be. We must optimally fund education if our students are to succeed for graduation and beyond, whatever that may be. It's up to them as our students matriculate through our school system and graduate. As long as Nevada funds education below average, our students will continue to suffer. So if we're to continue making gains, as I mentioned, because we've all made gains across this great state, we must optimally invest in our children. Should the choice be made not to fund education optimally, then we must ask ourselves, what outcomes are we prepared to accept with a less than optimal funding? Our children are to achieve better outcomes. We must focus on supporting them with optimal funding to produce the outcomes that they can deliver. So I wasn't a math teacher, I was a science teacher. But I know that chasing a maximum result from a minimal investment is a long shot and a gamble that our children in this state and our community can no longer afford. We've updated the pupil-centered funding formula. Now we must continue and we invest optimally for our children. Because I know the reports that was released and conversations about average funding on a 10-year plan. So what that means is that our second graders, by the time they graduate, we will consider funding at the average. And as one of my colleagues who's here with us, he reminds us that we don't go and ask our kids to be average. Thank you, and now I'll turn it to the Vice President of NAS, Superintendent Teal from
Pam Teal, Lincoln County School District. Considering that optimal funding that will help us support modernizing the educational statutes that will allow us to do the quality work that we need to do in innovative ways, such as competency-based education, more quality work-based project learning, the STEM, the Jumpstart to dual credit, all of those things are facilitated by that quality optimal funding to allow us to do those things. And so backing that ensures that we're able to give and provide those programs across the entire state, from your urban areas all the way to your rural areas. And then also enabling that technology piece, because we know how vital it is to ensure that we've got connectivity for one thing. In our rural areas, we struggle in some areas where we don't have connectivity, and we provide hotspots and everything we can to ensure that a student that needs to even remain at home and do education has those capabilities. But all of that costs money. And then updating those devices to ensure that they are usable by the teacher and the student takes that funding to make that happen. And we know the second we by technology. A year later, some of it is outdated, and we've got to continue that work to make sure our students are leaving with the success pieces of technology they need to be successful.
Madam Chair, I see a sign here that says it's unlawful to misrepresent any fact. I am not, in fact, Keith Lewis from Douglas County School District. My name is Wayne Workman. I have the privilege of serving as the superintendent for the Lyon County School District. And I've been asked to step in for our wonderful Keith Lewis today. With that said, I first and foremost want to thank each and every one of you for your service and all that you do. I know it's not easy for you to take time away from your life, your families, everything that you do to do this work, but it is important work, and I, for one, am truly grateful for you. I have the privilege of talking about investments in school safety and also our facilities. First and foremost, I feel obligated for us when we talk about school safety to not minimize the violence that takes place against our students and staff by calling it a school shooting. These individuals are not shooting schools. They are shooting and killing and murdering and massacring individuals, our students and staff within those schools. And therefore, I just want to make sure that we all say it how it is and not excuse the acts by minimizing them with titles. So with that said, I also want to discuss the importance of that. As you know, as President Jara has mentioned, we're looking at a new pupil-centered funding plan. And even the old plan with this new pupil-centered funding plan never accounted for hardening of our schools, nor did it account for what we asked for in the INVEST document with human capital around counselors, around social workers, around school psychologists, perhaps our school resource officers, all those people that help ensure the safety emotionally, physically, mentally of our students and staff. And so because of that, we are asking for this optimal funding so that we can not only get those people in place to help with the mental health crisis that we see ourselves facing in our communities, our state, and our country, but also for the physical hardening of our schools. Again, many school districts have done their best, and fortunately there was some grant funding earlier from the Nevada Legislature pre-pandemic that was, of course, swept back in during the pandemic, to which we were able to do some of the hardening of our schools. But current resources are not such that we can harden them to a point that we feel safe and secure with our students and staff. And so with that, we would love to see an investment into that. And going along with that is the facilities. As you, many of you, I understand, are educators or somehow related to education and have the privilege or pleasure of working in some of those facilities. I was having a conversation just yesterday with a wonderful, wonderful lady who was so proud to talk about her grandmother. So this particular individual was, we'll say, north of 50, but they were talking about their grandmother having attended the same school that they attended, the same school that their granddaughter is now attending, great-granddaughter. And although those are wonderful stories, they should cause some light bulbs to go off in our heads about the facilities that we are educating our children in. These are historic buildings and should be represented as such, but they do not have the ability to have the technology, as Superintendent Till mentioned, to the place where we are able to properly educate our children. We also have some of our school districts that no longer have the ability to go out for enough bonding to build new schools because of the systems that have been altered over the course of the years. talking about our property tax system and the abatements and the cap that is in place. School districts have lost out on millions and millions of dollars because of those caps and because they have not been reset. They serve a great purpose. As an individual consumer, I love having the low property taxes that I pay, but it comes at a serious cost to our students and our families in our school system. And so we're asking not necessarily for a specific investment in those facilities, although out of complete desperation, you will see a bill from one of our school districts that is specific to building an elementary school in their school district because they have no capacity to do this in the current structure. But we are asking for that to be reconsidered with how that system, that property tax system is in place, the cap, and what we can do to reset that and restructure that so that we can give our children and our staff, our teachers, those public servants, the best that we can, the best opportunity that we can for success. And so with that, I appreciate your time and thank you so much for listening to our presentation.
Thank you very much. And I know you have the exhibit, but all members have the exhibit, right? The Invest? Okay, just wanted to make sure. We're having a little bit of technical issues with some of our exhibits, so thank you so much. I will now open it up for questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation for Invest. I did read over it. A lot of great innovations that you are proposing, and for our students, I think that that's a plus because you're looking to invest in our children, and I think that that's something that we should all be doing right now. My question is that I see that you have K through 12, and I think that we're missing a very important component, and that's pre-K. When we say that we want to change the way our students learn, it starts with pre-K. And you have a 10-year plan. How do you encompass that pre-K component to this 10-year plan? Because I think that it's necessary for us to look at this right now.
Superintendent Jara, for the record, Assemblywoman Thomas, that is a great, and I love the question. Our Invest document was a combination of something that we prepared with our CFOs around the pupil-centered funding formula and the commission. We currently only fund K-12, right, in the state. One of the things that is, I would say to this body and to the legislature that we need, if we're going to improve literacy, we're going to improve academics, absolutely, there's got to be a huge investment up in early childhood. And I think that is something that we certainly need to, if we're going to, as I mentioned, improve our literacy. We know what the data tells us, but we have to start in pre-K. Agreed, totally agree with the question.
Thank you.
Pam Till, for the record, I so concur. You're talking to a former pre-K kindergarten teacher. If we don't start early, it's harder to get anything going by the time they are 6. So it has to start earlier, but it has to be funded just the same way to ensure that we're doing the best for those programs and those kids coming in.
Thank you. And we do have several questions from the members, and we have 3 presentations, so I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm just, next we will go with Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Many of you I think I've had a chance to meet with before, so it's always nice to see you. I have numerous questions, but I will make them quick or do the best I can. I will, it's true. It all has to do with the first bullet, and that has to do with our staffing levels. If you could possibly provide to us later for each district what our staffing levels are and where our greatest needs are. We all hear about the teachers, which I'm a proud member of that profession, but our counselors, our speech language pathologists, which are many times ignored, our occupational therapists, our bus drivers, our substitute teachers, and our administrators. We are lacking in this time. And I know that if you are looking at the two largest school districts, we're looking at more than 25 to 30% openings. But I have a feeling even in our small districts, we're looking at that same thing. So if you could possibly help us know that, so that way we can then utilize questions later around staffing and how we're able to attempt to find ways to bring people into this wonderful profession that we all share. My other question, though, has to do with the fourth bullet, and that has to do with the technology-rich area. I appreciate the emphasis on technology. However, I'm an English teacher, so I love my Shakespeare. So what are the plans when it comes to textbooks and or other more traditional ways of teaching? Because we are losing track of one of the most important skills, which is the ability to think on your feet and instead look at your cell phone. So if there are any sort of discussions in the INVEST plan, or if that's more of a personal district decision to utilize some of the other areas that are not technology rich.
And I just would like to say the first part of our question, if you could get those staffing levels to our policy analyst, and then I'll distribute it.
Madam Chair, Superintendent Jar, for the record, and I can tell you I speak for all of us because we've had this conversation, and my colleagues are here with us behind. The instructional materials is key. It's not just about technology. You're right. And I'm telling you, our concern collectively is that, and this is again goes back to the lack of funding. We are using federal dollars to fund and purchase instructional materials. In Clark County, and I know that in Lincoln and others, it's been over 10 years that we've been able to purchase materials that are aligned to the standards. So our educators, when folks talk about our performance, our educators are doing an amazing job with the resources that we have provided them as a state. So I thank you for the question, but that's something that we certainly need to invest when the funding comes in.
Thank you. And next we will go to, I'm trying to do in this order, Assemblywoman, LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here today. So I'm also a member of the teaching profession, so I know a lot of what's going on the ground with what you're describing. And I really appreciate you stressing the funding, because we know that's a huge issue. I was drawn to the school safety component, and you mentioned gun violence in schools, but I think another critical component is the increasing violence of student on student and student to staff. And so I would just love to hear your perspectives on what do you think the districts need to be doing to address that, and what do you need legislatively to be able to address that issue?
Madam Chair, Wayne Workman for the record. Excellent question. And just this morning, we were meeting as a NAS group and fortunate to be having discussions around some of the proposed bills regarding student discipline. And so to be very frank in answering that question, we need some serious changes in the student discipline laws. They are far too prohibitive, but at the same time, we also need to continue with the conversations and with the work around disproportionality of student discipline. And so we're very aware of that and receiving ongoing training as districts and school leaders so that we can ensure that we are not overrepresentative in certain areas, whether that's race, whether that's ability, disability, whatever that case is. But nonetheless, we certainly need those changes in the laws in order to help us have those safe places. Additionally, you'll notice that in the INVEST document, we really stressed those human capital positions of the school psychologists, the social workers, et cetera. We understand wholeheartedly that we can harden our facilities all we want, but oftentimes the threats are within. Usually, if you look at the data around school violence, it typically has some relation to that particular school. whether it was a student, a staff member, a family member, fill in the blank. And so recognizing the need for that ongoing mental health and creating those safe environments where students and staff feel comfortable learning and teaching.
I mentioned to you, we have several questions, so I'm just going to go ahead and say, next we will go to Assemblywoman Torres, then Assemblywoman Mosca, and then Assemblyman De Silva. Is that good for questions? And then we're going to move on to the next, right? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I do have a question for you, but I think also probably the department. It might require them to do some research, so I don't expect you all to answer right now. But I do know that in 2017, we passed a bill, and it's currently in NRS 389.310 regarding dual credit. And it requires districts to put together a report on dual credit enrollment, including the number of pupils enrolled in the program, a list of the courses, the number of pupils enrolled in each course, the demographics, the cost of the schools, the cost to the students. Do you all have those reports? Because we've never received a copy of it, and I've been on the Assembly Education Committee now for 3 legislative sessions. So I'm just hoping I can get those reports, or you can aggregate that data. Do you happen to know that information offhand? Also, what schools have dual credit programs, where we're seeing those programs? I know there has been an expansion throughout the state for a lot of dual credit programs, but where are we seeing those expansions?
Superintendent Jara, for the record, actually, as a NAS group, we met with UNR at the beginning of this year here, and UNLV and Nevada State College around dual credit. Actually last May, if I may. So I know that's something that we have been working together. We can certainly, send the reports, but I can tell you anecdotally for Clark County, we have been growing our dual credit with UNR significantly. So I can tell you we've had, when I got there in 2018, about 2,500, and I just reported we have 15,000 enrollments in dual credit, so we can certainly provide that information. But I know that as a group, all 17 superintendents met with the higher ed institutions around growing our dual credit, but we can certainly provide that data.
UNLV is also in the South.
We're working with them,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for all of you for being here today and sharing this really important information with us. We saw at our last meeting a presentation from the Nevada Commission on School Funding, which we know showed our current, and then it showed the national average, which I believe is what we're calling adequate, and then what APA, our subject matter expert, recommended, which I believe is optimal. Would love if you all could talk about I know you mentioned it a little bit, but what specific things we would see a difference if it was optimal versus adequate, so that we can see that as a group, and even maybe those who are not as familiar.
Pam Teal for the record. The basis of even the question from Anderson earlier around how are we making sure that classrooms have the materials they need? It goes all the way to Tier 1 instruction, where for years, like I say, we've been doing fabulous with what we have, but it's not even adequate, less alone optimal, to ensure that I have quality instructional materials aligned to standard to give my teachers so that they can do their job. And so we've band-aided it all over the place to ensure that we have at least something, but it is not up to the needs of the current 2023. Let alone what my students need next year. And so a big chunk for me would be just bringing everything up to where we have what we need in a classroom to do what we need to do. Instructional material-wise is a huge lift. I mean, we struggle if I need new curriculum, I can't just purchase it. It takes really either a grant or some other miraculous way, and I'm small. I can't imagine the huge lift in a larger district to try to ensure that we're up to grade with curriculum materials. So that would be the big one to me. But then also supplementing, as I'm doing the work around Portrait of a Graduate and building different pathways, then how is a small district going to implement different pathways if I have no money to provide the materials for those pathways, and then ensure I also have the money to employ that whole program, like the teacher, the whole 9 yards? Then I have to worry about getting a teacher, I get that. But I have to also have a mechanism to ensure that I can create that pathway, and the funding to support it.
Madam Chair, may I add? Or are we low on time?
We are low on time.
Then
Okay.
I'll take it offline. Thank you.
Assemblyman De Silva.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for this presentation. You know, as a Rancho High School teacher, it's pretty cool to ask a panel on which your boss's boss sits on. I think I got the levels right. So again, thank you all for being here and for your excellent presentation. I have, so we know that, there is a potential now in this, at the end of this session, for us to do some really great work in regards to education, and it could be a significant amount of funding coming through to our schools. And I'm very excited about that. My question is this: are there any plans in effect as to like how we'll be spending that money, and if there are any sort of specific things that we could address both in the north and in the south?
Wayne Workman for the record, Madam Chair. First and foremost, as you saw Invest and how it was laid out, we first have to take care of our people before our people can take care of our children. And we recognize that wholeheartedly and know that our people are the silver bullet. I oftentimes equate this to the most noble profession on the planet. And I only excuse that from our other public servants, law enforcement, perhaps military. But teachers and teaching and the education profession is one of the most noble on the planet, and we need to not only compensate but treat them as such in the media, in our public, in our communities. We all believe that wholeheartedly, and that's why that's first on the list. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will let you guys sit back. Thank you guys so much for being here, and we look forward to working with you. All right, next we have a presentation from the Nevada Department of Education. We will discuss the state of education in Nevada. To present, we have Joan Ebert, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Dwayne Young, Interim Deputy Superintendent of Student Achievement, and Craig Stucktucky, Interim Deputy Superintendent of Educator Effectiveness and Family Engagement. Say that 5 times fast. And, do we not have, who do we have? We only have 3 of you. Okay, because that makes sense. And we also have Megan Peterson, Deputy Superintendent of Student Investment. You may be called up here, so one of you guys can walk away, so. All right, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Bilbray, Axelrod. It is so wonderful to see you, Vice Chair Taylor, as well, members of this esteemed Education Committee. I'm honored to be here in front of you today. I'm honored to serve as the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. My name is Joan Ebert. I also serve as the Secretary on the State Board of Education, which sometimes people wonder where that link is. And so I share that this afternoon to close that gap. We're also joined by some staff in Las Vegas. They're in the room, so I want to thank them for being here too. So the work of the Nevada Department of Education is centered around our values. Access, I'm sorry, Chair, I don't know if oh, yep, there it is. Okay. Wanted to make sure our presentation was up.
Actually, wait, because this is just in our room. So if we can see you, we're not seeing it yet.
That's
so.
not good when you can see me.
No, stop it. Stop it. We're nice to each other in this committee. It's up? All right, great.
Okay, great. The work of the Nevada Department of Education is centered around our values of equity, access to quality, success, inclusivity, community, and transparency. These values inform the work as we focus our efforts to support and engage districts, schools, families, our community at large in meeting the academic and social-emotional needs of all of our Nevadan learners. The values are non-negotiable, essential, and present in all the work we do. And so today, we're delighted to share with you highlights and opportunities for education. The state of education is not only about outcomes and funding. It's at the heart of everything we do. The state of the entire education system is about all Nevadans, who we are and who we want to be. In one way or another, education touches the lives of every Nevada citizen. First, our schools equip students for a home, a life, and a future. Second, our schools provide the common experience that is the foundation of a free, just, and prosperous society. At their best, schools are Nevada's pathway to a healthy workforce. They are the engine of our economy. Finally, minimizing PK-12 costs is a surefire way to hinder our future economic vitality. Nevada education serves almost 500,000 students and their families in 763 schools, managed by almost 28,000 educators and staff. The Nevada Department of Education is home to 17 school districts, as well as the State Public Charter School Authority. The needs of each of our districts are as unique as the counties they serve. I've always said, if you see and visit one Nevada school district, you've visited one Nevada school district. We at the Department of Education, which I may refer to during this presentation as the Department or NDE, pride ourselves on partnering with stakeholders to achieve our mission, which is to improve student achievement and educator effectiveness by ensuring opportunities, facilitating learning, and promoting excellence. As some of you may know, I started my career as a middle school math teacher in the Clark County School District. It is in this vein that I'd like to propose a formula to you. And the results of Nevada's education system are dependent upon the collaboration of these three things. First, the retention and recruitment of effective and supported educators. Innovative approaches to our learning and the state's fiscal investments in our students. We believe that each of these components amplifies the others to substantially increase the success. Therefore, the formula multiplies each of these inputs together. It's at this time that I'd like to share some of the successes that we've seen over this last year and the challenges facing us in the current state of education. The first part of the equation is about having effective and supportive educators. Our educators, as you've heard, our superintendents testify, the heart of our educational system. The hard work and dedication of these individuals who make a difference in the lives of every student every single day should be amplified. I continually share with our business partners, community, government, anyone that will listen, that the educators in the state of Nevada are the best in the nation. I would put any one of our educators up against anyone in the nation, and they will outperform all others. So let me be specific and give you some examples. Code.org recognizes educators for programs related to computer science. Recently, Nevada had 2 individuals and 1 team of educators, each receiving $10,000 awards for their exceptional work. I'd like to point out that typically only 2 awards are given in a state. But they called us and asked us if it was okay if they gave a 3rd, because they could not leave that 1 team behind. And so they recognized them. I'm also proud to share that over the last few days, I've had the honor to celebrate incredible educators in our system and recognize them with the Milken Educator Award. And that award is for early to mid-career education professionals and their impressive achievements. Both the Washoe County School District had 2 alone that we celebrated, and then also in Elko County School District, West Wendover was just, there we go, Superintendent Anderson is here as well, and it is just, it's so heartwarming to see the children celebrate and know that their future is with their educators, and how not only do we see them and value them here locally, but they're valued nationally as well. 3 educators in Nevada. Usually, there are only 40 educators total across the United States every single year. Some states receive 0. We had 3, and in 2020, we had 2. Finally, recognizing our Nevada Teacher of the Year and the teacher finalists. These educators were selected through a rigorous process, which is recognized by myself and the State Board of Education for their impressive work with students. The relationships they build and passion demonstrated can be echoed throughout the many successful classrooms in this state. So it's recognition like Code.org, Milken, Teacher of the Year, Superintendent of the Year. We also have Superintendent Stevens in the audience, who is Superintendent of the Year. All of this coming together should inspire us to want to provide and produce more educators just like this that are recognized, valued, and seen. So we build our teacher workforce and we continue to support them each and every day. And with those funds that were spoken to earlier, compensation, work environment, making sure that our students have the school supplies that they so readily need and deserve. Our department is dedicated to growing our current and future educator workforce, and we're taking a multi-pronged approach in this area. We're starting with our PK-12 schools. We have high school career and technical education courses, which are called teaching and training. This year, we have over 4,200 students enrolled in the teaching and training courses in 45 schools and in 8 of our districts and charter schools. 336 of those students are currently enrolled in dual credit courses. So by developing our future teachers and capturing their hearts in high school, we're expanding our reach and ensuring that students see themselves as teachers and educators in the workforce, being prepared for the successful work that we see them going on into college. This last year, we provided over 2,000 future teachers, $10.5 million in stipends for tuition assistance granted by the department through the federal funding. Another $9 million was granted to provide professional development through the Nevada Educator Preparation Institute and Collaborative. Educators in the room might know that as NV EPIC. Another $1 million went toward literacy professional development through initiatives such as the Path to Teach Reading Excellence at School Sites, or PRESS, and Literacy Lifeline. We also have many showcasing institutes, Literacy Summit with national keynote speakers and presenters. We've also secured a U.S. Department of Education competitive grant based on mental health services. $10 million. It is $2 million per year until 2025. That objective of that grant is to recruit, retain, and re-specialize school counselors, psychologists, and social workers to increase mental health services and reduce the student-to-support personnel ratios. Currently, we're collaborating with the Nevada System of Higher Education to bring us this work, specifically the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, the University of Nevada, Reno, and Nevada State College. Already addressed this morning, but I would like to double down and thank and recognize every single one of our counselors. It is Counselors Week, and so congratulate, thank, and honor them for all of the work that they do. One thing the Nevada Department of Education prides ourselves on is not only supporting students, but adults in our system, and that includes parents and families. In collaboration with stakeholders such as the Nevada PTA, we're supporting families through initiatives such as the Family Engagement Framework. This framework provides a statewide approach to family engagement that is based on research and evidence, and it was developed locally in collaboration with families, educators, and community members. The biennial statewide Family Engagement Summit is another opportunity for families, educators, and community members to come together and learn about best practices and strategies in family engagement. The last 2 summits have supported over 600 families, and we're very proud of the work that we continue to expand and make sure that our goal of reaching over 1,000 families in 1 year. Moving on in the equation, we're going to talk about innovative approaches to learning and how our state is moving forward with unique learning experiences that not only are engaging but prepare them for life and the future. We know that skill sets related to robotics, engineering, and coding are part of the future, and we've made impressive growth in that area. We've supported FIRST Robotics, where we've seen 269 schools, 2,590 students participating in this program, which provides hands-on learning opportunities in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. For over 40 years, Nevada has celebrated Nevada Reading Week. This past year, Nevada Reading Week hosted 13 nationally recognized local authors in the Author Live event. 13 local authors that are nationally recognized. We're going to increase that to 20 this year, and we hope that you'll be able to join us during Reading Week as well. Each of these authors promote literacy and encourage our students to pursue the love of reading. I'd also like to highlight our commitment to digital learning, and I'm happy to bring to attention where we are an absolute leader, and that's in computer science. Nevada is among the top 5 states leading the nation in computer science education, meeting all 9 criteria identified by the national stakeholders as essential for high-quality computer science education. So rounding out this slide, we know that not one of us can do this work alone. And I'd like to quote a recent article by Tammy Hans-Laird and Alex Bybee. Quote, "Here's one thing we know for sure. Our schools cannot develop our children into prepared adults alone. It will take more than public education to get Nevada to a 100% graduation rate." So public-private partnerships were very critical for all of us during the pandemic. I know many of the accomplishments that were had would not have been had if we did not engage with our business partners who disrupted supply chains to make sure that our students and our schools had the resources that they need. And we need to continue to make sure that we amplify that. Nevada is one of the few places, I think summer school was brought up earlier, that does not fund summer school. During the pandemic, students were not afforded the opportunity for face-to-face instruction. Not all students, excuse me. Some of our school districts were able to have face-to-face. Knowing this summer school and after-school opportunities were provided by securing nearly $15 million in federal relief funding. The programs developed through this commitment gave students additional learning aimed at closing opportunity gaps and engaging students in alternative experiences. Finally, we've launched Nevada Future of Learning Network and Portrait of a Learner initiative to create opportunities for students to demonstrate their mastery of learning at a pace that suits the students. We are providing these resources, funding, thinking about the future, putting our students in the driver's seat to explore their interests and incorporate an understanding of foundational skills in a meaningful way. We're starting up our competency-based fellowship, which will develop and define the process and products for flexible instruction practices. The third part of the equation is investing in our students. The common thread in this work is that the funding needs to be there to make the work happen. Supporting our educators and families and putting together all of these programs is a result of the investment made to help our children, but is much more complicated than just giving money. One of the most notable advancements for education in Nevada has been the establishment of the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan. That is thanks to the leadership of this legislature and the efforts of the Commission on School Funding and many of the staff who made it possible. The opportunity to revisit the oldest funding formula in the nation with a focus on equity was a big part of the reason why I returned home to Nevada 4 years ago. And we should all be extremely proud about this tremendous accomplishment. Our new formula combines 20 different revenue sources to provide all students with a base level of funding, while also giving greater support to those who need it, no matter where they attend school. The Pupil-Centered Funding Plan is flexible, allowing schools to make funding decisions based on their changing demographics and needs. This replaces the 54-year-old Nevada plan and adjusts costs for urban, suburban, and rural settings. As it stands today, the pupil-centered funding plan has been implemented this school year, and it's running. And I'm grateful for Governor Lombardo's $2 billion executive budget proposal and the support of fully funding the weights. In addition to assuring that the funding is distributed equitably, we're also investing in our staff and students' mental and physical health. Having trained mental health professionals on our campus is of utmost importance to ensure that we are building relationships and supporting our children and staff so that the work of educating our students can happen in a safe and respectful learning environment. To this end, the department allocated $7.5 million, and on top of that, this legislative body secured $4 million of the American Rescue Plan Act funds to increase the presence and capacity of mental health professionals on our campuses. We've also allocated almost $1 million to providers to address trauma for students who are minimally or not insured at all. Assemblywoman Thomas brought up our youngest learners, and we know that our students need support to be prepared for school. The department continues to offer more pre-K seats through programs throughout the state. Using the federal relief funding, we supported $3 million to expand pre-K access. But to put that in perspective, that added only about 300 seats. So this is why we're very encouraged about the governor's commitment to dedicate $60 million to pre-K access. There have been some amazing programs and initiatives and opportunities to come out of the funding, but unfortunately, as we've heard, this is not enough. National reports show that Nevada is still last in the country for per pupil funding, and yet our educators and students continue to perform. Imagine the lengths and how far all of our children would grow and go with an investment in their learning. Remember to think of it this way. Our future workforce is sitting in our classrooms right now across the state, and that workforce will only be successful in the future if we invest in them today. Well, I've been sharing the successes and opportunities for improvement. There may have been some of you sitting there thinking, okay, Joan, there are reports out there that put us last in the nation in our schools and our students. And the truth is, we know that there are great opportunities for us to improve what is happening in Nevada. The reports put us dead last in school funding. Federal relief funds have helped expand some of the opportunities, but the reality is that we are still well below the national average in per pupil funding. In his State of the State address, Governor Lombardo announced his commitment to increase the per pupil funding amount from $9,185 to $11,668, getting close to the national average. But it is still almost $2,700 short of what the Commission on School Funding indicated was average. So we are very thankful for moving in a very short period of time, but we still have a long way to go. Despite the funding shortage, we have historically seen our schools continue to persevere. Student literacy proficiency is showing that we are about near pre-pandemic numbers, and our students continue to close the difference between the Nevada and national public school averages. But we still have gaps to close to get all of our students to proficient levels. And we look at these averages, we want not only to we not only want to meet but exceed the national average as we move forward. Graduation rates are starting to climb again after experiencing a slight decline during the pandemic, but we need to take a moment to acknowledge the growth that has transpired over the last 10 years. We continue to work hard with the resources that we've been given, and I fully expect that when we see this graph next year and the year after, that we'll see a larger spike moving forward. I'd also like to celebrate that our schools and our students have achieved an increased percentage in those receiving a college and career readiness diploma. It is the State Board of Education goal to have over 50% achieve that mark by 2025. As we know, the pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to education across the world. But I am here to say that Nevada's education system has endured and improved. We know the importance of education, and we stand on the edge of an even greater opportunity to ensure Nevada's children have equitable access to high-quality learning experiences. When it comes to the equation for education, we can see the work being done, but we can also envision the work that must transpire to improve our outcomes. To have effective and supported educators, we must retain amazing educators in our schools, recruit top-notch candidates from around the globe, and engage our families in the education process. Through innovative approaches to learning that engage, excite, and empower our children to construct understanding and demonstrate that our children are important in the future. And by investing in students, not only are we saying that we know our children deserve better, but also that we are dedicated to building a greater future for all Nevadans. Our students deserve the very best educators, the best facilities, the best funding, the best chance for success that a government and the department can provide in this era. The work is here, right in front of us, and the workers are here, ready to do the work. It is my sincere hope that you have heard the things today that encourage your view of the state of education in Nevada, but also that you heard some of the challenges and thought about how you can be a part of the solution. My team and I look forward to working with you during this session and to continue to improve on all of the opportunities that we have in front of us for Nevada's children, as well as every single Nevadan. Chair, we stand ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Ebert. First, we will go to Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, very engaging and always exciting to hear about. I actually have two questions. My first has to do with our new slide number 3 that didn't seem to print off when we were looking at it. You mentioned very specifically 27,123 teachers. I think all of us that are educators realize that it's not just teachers. We also have our counselors. We have our incredibly essential support professionals, our aides, et cetera. You don't need to have these numbers at this time for us, but if you could possibly also let us know about the number of administrators and the number of non-licensed individuals who are also part of our schools. Because again, we must have our registrars to be able to make sure that we can do the work, our custodians. I appreciate the fact that you continue to highlight teachers, but I think all of us realize it takes a village and many different professions. You don't need to answer that now, but if you could possibly get us those numbers of what all the employees are that are employed at a school district, it would be greatly appreciated. So that's just my first question. My second, however, is from slide 15, the school funding. I know you're not at all surprised by that. When I take a look at the presentation that we had just last meeting on the Nevada Commission on School Funding, and I look at Mr. Hobbs's information from page 4 of it, there's a discrepancy. You state, or the presentation that is today states that the proposed information for the national average is 11,000. Mr. Hobbs's presentation was different. And again, the national average is different. So I'm just wondering, as is the possible, no, that's all I've got. So could you possibly address that discrepancy from what is being recommended from the information from that committee, and then also why there is such a difference?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Anderson. For the record, State Superintendent Joan Ebert. So we actually struggled on which number, and should we put multiple numbers as well. This number we pulled from the November report of the Commission on School Funding. So we thought we'd be consistent in that manner. Chair Hobbs just produced that presentation this week, and we had already produced this presentation. And so thank you for calling the question. But this is consistent with what was published in November, and he has updated Because as you know, other states across the nation have increased their funding for education as well, and he's pulled in that data.
Follow up, if I may.
We have a lot of questions.
I guess that's a no. Thank you.
No problem.
And also, those 3 of those people that were recognized, they all live in Assembly District 30. Just saying. Boom, boom, teachers.
Next, we will go, so I'm just going to do this, Assemblywoman Mosca, Vice Chair Taylor, Assemblywoman Torres, and Assemblywoman De Silva. Everybody good? Okay, let's do it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. I was hoping that you could just share at a high level what is going, well, other than the total amount, so not that, but when it comes to the implementation of the new per pupil student funding, what's going well, and what should we know that we need to work on?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Mosca. For the record, State Superintendent Joan Ebert. The formula was 54 years old. It was based on, in some instances, how far the bus traveled. It did not look at the composition or needs of individual students. So it was really critical for everyone when the formula was named is a pupil-centered formula, right? Pupil-centered. And with that, it takes a look in the demographics of our students, and we have great assets in our state. Our students speak multiple languages, and we want to make sure that they also speak English and can write English and share their languages as well. We'd love to have multilingual students graduate. Every student, I can't speak. I would love to have multilingual graduates across our entire state. That being said, we know additional resources are needed for our ELL learners. We also know additional resources are needed for at-risk, our GATE students, special education students. And now the formula runs in that way. Also, to future leaning, working on that formula was important because we've seen it across our state over decades where we've flourished. We have a lot of money coming in. And then we've also seen where we've crashed. And to have a portion of the money that comes in and have an education savings account for education for our youngest learners set aside specifically, that is really forward leaning. In that respect, we will be able to weather a downturn in the future. So those are just a few of the things that I would highlight that are working really well.
And then what's not working well, so we know.
Oh, thank you, Superintendent Ebert, for the record. What I would say is there is no perfect formula. Everyone has a place of where they sit and where they see things, so everyone can agree on equity moving forward. It's how the numbers are run. I think the amount of time that we took as a state, which I would say is decades, a lot of work happened really quickly in 2019, but the work was over decades. When you start with a base of what you want children to know and be able to do and how you want to support them and equity, you keep that at the center of the work. But once it starts and everyone agrees at that point, and then once it starts flowing and individual people see where the dollars are, I would tell you that some people are not happy at the end. So it's an interesting process to go through. And I think always going back to what is true, that if we think of our state as a state and not a group of individuals, we will move forward together faster as a state.
Vice Chair Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question. On slide 7, you did a great job of talking about the programs that NDE is doing to develop teachers, to attract more teachers and bring more into, and to the profession, even from our state. I love to grow your own because they're already Nevadans. My question is, you didn't mention this, and it may be a part of this. Is there any, do you see any need, or is there something there that maybe targets where we have high needs areas, whether it's math, science, special ed, or whether it's teachers with diverse backgrounds, since the diversity in our state is growing so fast? In any efforts to do any targeting in that, or encouragement, or anything like that?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. In that,
I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second, just so if there's any confusion. Our slide numbers are different. So we're on effective and supported educators with the
Yes.
stipend and tuition. There you go. Thank you.
Okay,
and yeah,
thank
to
you.
be fully transparent, that was because we had to produce these slides before the last person was announced as an awardee. So we didn't want the secret out. That being said, with all of these and strategic, we know our teaching workforce is not nearly as diverse as the children in our classroom, right? Our children, the community, our K-12, our PK-12 population is very diverse. And so that's where intentionality on knowing the diversity of our own students, and then knowing the data show that when you do your student teaching and where you live, you have a high chance, 95% I believe it is, that you will stay in that community. And so being strategic and targeted, building out that pipeline has been there for us. We're also working with UNLV specifically on Black educators across our state, and then I know our individual school districts have been working to diversify the student population, or excuse me, the population of, actually, and Assemblywoman Anderson noted, the entire ecosystem of support so that our children see themselves no matter where they are, if they're receiving with a support staff or with a teacher or with an administrator, that diversity we need to double down on, because we do not have a diverse ecosystem now as far as it goes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your presentation. And although it was not planned, Assemblywoman Taylor's question kind of leads into the question that I'm about to ask regarding teacher licensure and some of the barriers that occur for teachers. Obviously there's been a number of reports that have spoken to a great many teachers about, like, they're in that limbo where they have not yet received their license. Can you talk about what some of those obstacles are for teachers that are getting licensed, as well as, and kind of separately but trying to include it all together, some of the issues for student teachers and getting student teachers across the finish line?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, because I want to make sure I answer your question, are you talking about the provisional licenses that we offer?
Getting teachers licensed, so when they're in that limbo, they have already graduated from a program, but they have not yet received their teaching license. What are some of the obstacles that teacher might have?
Thank you. Craig Zatuki, Interim Deputy Superintendent for Educator Effectiveness and Family Engagement. And yes, it is a tongue twister when you try and say it fast, even one time. Assemblywoman Torres, thank you very much for your question. In terms of addressing kind of those barriers, one of the things that we have worked with in terms with Nevada State College, the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and the University of Nevada, Reno, is when we get to the commencement portion of it, there's usually a lag, sometimes 6 to 8 weeks between when a student graduates and when their transcripts are ready. And so we have developed a process with those universities so that the universities provide us a memo with their graduates who should be able to become licensed teachers. Those teachers upload that memo with their application, and so then what we do is we provide them a provisional for 90 days that's non-renewable, so that we can get them into the classroom while their transcripts are being finalized and processed, and then we can process those transcripts at that time. Did I address your question on that portion?
Yeah, and has a praxis been one of those barriers, or anything else to getting teachers licensed?
Craig Zatuki, Interim Deputy Superintendent for Educator Effectiveness and Family Engagement. For the record, Assemblywoman Torres, thank you for the question. And we're looking at, as everyone looks at, we're looking at the praxis scores. I know that we recently had a regulation where we were looking at utilizing alternate sources such as an ACT or an SAT score within the last 10 years. So we're still reviewing that process through that regulation. And as you know, with Executive Orders 3 and 4, certain regulations are currently on hold. So we're working with the governor's office to process that piece. And so we believe that that's going to be one way of kind of helping facilitate some of that pipeline concerns that we have around the Praxis Corps.
Assemblyman De Silva, and then Assemblywoman LaRouche.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again for your presentation. So I have a couple questions that were texted into me from constituents and from students. Going into this, first and foremost, those of you who are watching, my students, there are several who are watching right now. I want to say thank you for doing your due diligence, watching this proceed. I'm proud of you, and I miss you all. This is their first week without me in the classroom. And the other is coming from a school principal in my district. So I'll go with the student question first, and then to the principal's questions second. So the first question is from my students, and again, this is directly from our young people, and it's similar to the question that I asked earlier. They want to know what the top three priorities would be for the money that hopefully will be coming here soon. And then the second one is from a principal, and I can see why this is coming from a principal. Has there been any consideration in examining cell phone policy usage in our classrooms, in our Nevada classrooms? Those are the two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. State Superintendent Joan Ebert, for the record, at the state level, we have not looked backing up when I hear the principals. We have not looked at that. We in Nevada really encourage, especially local control, right? First, starting at the building level, working with principals, the superintendents. So, yeah, if there is a need to do a law, we could bring it forth to you, but I really encourage the principal to work with their superintendent and address that issue locally. With the first question of the students, I love that they asked that question. What we've really been doing on a lot of our work is flipping those pieces of what is it that you see that you need. And I will tell you first and foremost, and students say it every single time, and there are long-term subs that I adore across our entire state. But they want a highly effective licensed educator in their room. They want more adults on campus. They want, it's not just about things, but it's that connection with people that care deeply about who they are, that will meet them where they're at and bring them to success. That is the number one thing. And so we know that there are, and we've addressed it in our presentation, we've had roadblocks in Nevada recently for being able to attain more highly effective educators. But we are doing everything we can to amplify that Nevada is where they want to be and should be, and I encourage those students to become educators. The other piece that I would add in a short period of time is school safety. Those are the top two. Having a highly effective educator and then school safety is what we hear quite a bit about.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming and presenting this information today. So my question is around class size. We have some of the largest class sizes in the nation, as you know. And my question is, what are we doing to reduce class size? And also, when districts apply for waivers to the class size caps in K through 3, what corrective actions, if any, are they required to take in order to get that waiver?
State Superintendent Joan Ebert, for the record, thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. So for going backwards from the question that you asked with the waivers, those are submitted currently on a quarterly basis. We do have by classroom at school level and by classroom data by grade level. And so when we look at those reports, go to the State Board of Education. When they report, there is usually there are 4 areas that they can report on. One is a teaching shortage. They don't have the educators to lower the class size. Number 2 is the facilities. There are not enough classrooms themselves to support the number of students that are there. Number 3 is funding limitations. So they do not have the funds. And then number 4 is other. The first two are the ones that we see the most. And I would say the first one that I noted is having enough educators to support. We've been asked to work with the State Board of Education to revisit the current implementation. There are sanctions that the State Board of Education or the State Superintendent of Public Instruction can put in place for the districts to come in alignment with meeting those numbers. My apologies, now I forgot your first question.
It was just what efforts are being undertaken to address class size?
Yeah, so I would go right to the teaching components, having enough educators. And when I say educators, and we've been very intentional in using that in our language, and I know our slide said teachers there, but when we say educators, we are talking about school counselors, psychologists, the administrators, teachers, all of them together. And in that realm, we have, and we will get the specific numbers as asked, but over 2,500 vacancies in our state. We need to fill those vacancies quickly. I know the funding that will be made available out of this legislative session will help immensely to doing that. But also climate, culture, keeping the educators that are currently in our classrooms is huge. So focusing in those areas are top of mind.
And we have our final question, I believe, from Assemblywoman Hanson. Welcome back from the principal's office. I told everyone that story.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I got called to the principal's office. Thank you for being here. It's so good to see so many superintendents and those from the Charter School Authority. So thank you for being here. My question, first a comment. I was so glad to hear your comment, Superintendent Ebert, about local control. Yay. I think our superintendents probably feel the same way too, but I don't want to speak for them. So when it comes to cell phone usage, I would hope you could say, don't bring your phone in the classroom. But going to your slide on student proficiency, it comes up as 16 on my view, but on the student proficiency, we talk about the National Assessment of Educational Progress. We talk about reading, fourth grade, and mathematics. As I was looking at that scale or that graph, do you have an explanation, and I know this is putting you on the spot, I'm just curious, it seems like it's better in math than it is in reading on that assessment for those fourth graders. I'm just curious, do we have any sort of understanding of why those fourth grade students might be doing better in math and reading being more of a chore?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, are you specifically looking at the gap between the state and the national, or?
No, just the difference when you look at Nevada's, it is Nevada, right? And in the dark.
Yes.
And on the reading, and then look at the Nevada on the math. I'm just wondering, it seems like we perform a little bit better in mathematics in the fourth grade assessment than we do in the reading. And those of you who know me, I'm always on this broken record about our reading proficiency. Math is very important, but I'm wanting us to really improve those reading abilities, so.
Yeah, Superintendent Ebert, for the record, so two things I would note on this one slide. Number one, in the mathematics, I wouldn't compare the math numbers like 200, it's too tiny for me, but the numbers themselves, the number that's displayed in math and reading, because they're different scale scores. So they're derived differently. But what I would note, and that I share often, is that the legislature did invest heavily in reading in 2015. And, backing up to 2013 too. From that investment, you can see that in 2019, our students actually met the national average. And so when people, say, well, what about this new funding that's coming in? When we have invested as a state, we have data. We have the return on investment. Our students will perform when given the resources, when our teachers, when we have our teachers in the classroom, they will perform. And that data point is is very important to see. And then obviously we had loss during the pandemic. So that's where you see the decline, both nationally and locally.
Thank you for clarifying that. And just with that 15 investment, right? And we had read by 3. So, yeah, I think there were several factors, some reforms, read by 3, and then we kind of tampered with read by 3 a little bit after 18 into that zone too. So, well, thank you for clarifying and appreciate again you guys all being here.
Well, thank you very much for being here. You can go back to your chairs. All right, next we have a presentation from the State Public Charter School Authority about their organization and their schools. To present, we have Rebecca Fiden, Executive Director, and Ryan Herrick, General Counsel. Please go ahead when ready. Technical difficulties.
It's been a few years since we've sat at this table.
Isn't that the truth?
All right, good afternoon, Chair Bilbray Axelrod, Vice Chair Taylor, members of the Assembly Education Committee. My name is Rebecca Fiden, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of the State Public Charter School Authority, and with me today is our General Counsel, Ryan Herrick. Today I'll be providing the committee with a brief overview of the SPCSA, or State Public Charter School Authority, as well as information about the performance of our schools. As you may know, the State Public Charter School Authority was created in 2011 with 3 primary purposes: to authorize high-quality schools, to provide oversight to those schools, and to serve as a model of best practices in charter school authorizing. The State Public Charter School Authority's strategic plan, which was adopted in December of 2019, is centered on a vision of equitable access to diverse, innovative, and high-quality public schools for every Nevada student. And our mission is to sponsor, support, and oversee dynamic and responsive public charter schools that prepare all students for academic, social, and economic success. The State Public Charter School Authority has a 9-member appointed board. We currently have 27 full-time employees spread across our 2 offices in Carson City and Las Vegas. And in addition to the statutory purposes I outlined earlier, we also serve as the local educational agency, or LEA, for our schools, which means we have certain responsibilities as outlined in federal law, including the responsibility to administer certain federal education grants. Annually, those grants account for about $40 million that we receive from the Nevada Department of Education and pass through to our schools. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen an additional approximately $100 million in federal funds. For the 2022-23 school year, the State Public Charter School Authority oversees 78 charter school campuses located across 5 counties, and the majority of our schools are located in Clark County. Enrollment as of October 1st of 2022 was just under 60,000 students, which equates to about 12% of the state's public school enrollment. Charter schools offer a wide variety of educational models, and as you can see in the list on this slide, this provides a wide range of educational options for students and families. One of the things we often get questions about is where the State Public Charter School Authority fits into the educational landscape. And so the next few slides are aimed at providing some information about who all the different entities are and explaining to you some of the common charter school terminology that you may hear. As you know, the Nevada Department of Education is the state educational agency, and the State Public Charter School Authority follows NDE guidance, policies, procedures, as well as reports certain data and information to the Department of Education, just like a school district would. However, what makes the State Public Charter School Authority unique is that we are, unlike a school district, we do not operate our schools. Instead, we are a charter school sponsor. And I'll note that nationally, sometimes people use the term authorizer instead of sponsor, so if you hear that term, they're sometimes used interchangeably. As I mentioned, we're also the local educational agency and receive grants from the Department of Education that we pass through to our schools. And finally, we're also a state agency and part of the executive branch. So again, the SPCSA does not operate schools. Instead, we sponsor schools. And so each of our schools is subject to a charter contract. The charter contract is between the State Public Charter School Authority Board and the governing body of the charter school. So we often refer to those governing bodies that hold the contract with the state as the charter holder. And the charter holder or governing body is responsible for operating the school. A charter holder or governing body can have multiple campuses or a single campus. For example, Matter Academy in Southern Nevada has 3 campuses, so that's one governing body or charter holder with 3 campuses. However, Alpine Academy up here in Sparks is a governing body with just 1 campus. So again, there's some variety from charter holder to charter holder. Finally, and I'll explain this a little bit further on the subsequent slides, the charter holder or governing body can contract with vendors for services. And again, I'll get to that in just a moment. This slide provides more detail regarding how the charter schools are structured. And again, each campus will have administrators and staff. And I'll note that all of those individuals are employed by the charter school's governing board, not by the State Public Charter School Authority. So again, we only have a staff of 27. Typically, when there are multiple campuses, there's an executive director or lead principal who primarily reports to the board, but the administrative structure of our schools can vary. For example, we have one charter holder that has an executive director of operations, an executive director of academics, and they both report to the board directly. As I mentioned, the charter holder can also contract with vendors. And this is very typical, and sometimes these are similar to contracts that a school district might have with a vendor, such as contracts for professional development, legal services, curriculum, etc. However, because a lot of our schools are substantially smaller than a school district, many of them don't have the scale or size to make, for example, managing information technology in-house cost-effective. And so again, you often see schools contracting for specialty services like information technology, legal, accounting, because they're too small to have their own staff for those purposes. In some cases, charter schools contract with organizations called education management organizations or charter management organizations. These are entities that provide centralized school services, support services to schools, so they may offer a package of services rather than a school finding each vendor and taking a more a la carte approach. The difference between an EMO and a CMO is basically whether or not they are incorporated as a nonprofit. To be a CMO or charter management organization, the organization would need to be a nonprofit. CMOs and EMOs can vary significantly in terms of the services they provide, but some common services are listed here on this slide. In addition, the fees paid by the school to the CMO or EMO can vary based on those services and the package of services that is provided. It's important to note that the EMO and CMO that a school may contract with, they are vendors of the charter holder, vendors of the governing board. And so it's the governing board's role to oversee those services, to hold those vendors accountable for fulfilling their contracts, and make sure that the funds that they receive, the public dollars, are used responsibly and effectively. So again, I know this is a lot of jargon, but hopefully this helps to paint a picture of all the parties and how they interact. So now I'll switch gears and talk about school performance. The State Public Charter School Authority has been focused on 3 strategic goals: providing families with access to high-quality schools, ensuring all students succeed, including those from historically underserved student groups, and increasing the diversity of students served to ensure we serve a representative population of students. With regard to our first goal, high-quality schools, despite the impacts of COVID-19, we have continued to make academic gains. Based on data from the Nevada School Performance Framework, which measures all public schools across the state, 80% of our schools had an index score of 50 or higher, which in a typical year would equate to a 3-star rating, or a 3-star or higher rating, I should say. Additionally, the State Public Charter School Authority has an 86% graduation rate, which is up from 79% back in 2019. Almost every one of our high schools had a graduation rate above the statewide graduation rate as well. When looking at the national context, we also see that the State Public Charter School Authority schools have outperformed state proficiency rates in many other states that offer the Smarter Balanced Assessment to third through eighth grade students. Finally, we see that both Title I and non-Title I schools tend to outperform the state averages when it comes to the school performance framework. Here again, we use the 50-point cutoff for index score because that's where the typical cutoff is for a 3-star school. And so you can see here that though our Title I schools, we have a fewer percentage that are 50% above the 50-point cutoff. We do see that most of our schools are in fact above that 50 cutoff. Moving to goal 2, which is focused on ensuring every student succeeds. This graph shows the difference between the State Public Charter School Authority's proficiency rate and the state's proficiency rate. When we look at data by student group, we see that across every student group, State Public Charter School Authority students exceed the state average in math and English language arts on the 3rd to 8th grade Smarter Balanced Assessment. With regard to the 11th grade ACT assessment, State Public Charter School Authority students exceed the statewide average in math and ELA in almost every student group. I will say while we are proud of these results, we continue to work to improve outcomes for every student across every student group within our schools. Finally, regarding Goal 3, serving a representative population of students, the State Public Charter School Authority has made steady progress towards alignment with the state's demographics, and this includes steady increases in the percentage of students qualifying for free and reduced price lunch, as well as English learners. In particular, we have seen that the new schools we've opened over the last 4 years have been more reflective of the state's demographics, which has helped to drive some of that change we've seen over the last couple of years. So to summarize, the State Public Charter School Authority's work is centered on a vision of equitable access to diverse, innovative, and high-quality public schools for every Nevada student. As demonstrated through our strategic goals, we aim to provide high-quality schools that serve all students effectively. And with that, Chair Bilbray-Axelrod, we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fiden. I think our first question is from Assemblywoman Mosca.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for the helpful presentation. 2 things we know that our educators at state public charter schools talk about a lot are transportation as well as special education funding. I'm wondering if you could please talk about your thoughts on the Commission on School Funding's recommendation for charter school transportation funding, as well as issues when it comes to special education funding, knowing that the state public charter schools now have larger amounts of students who identify as special education.
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Mosca. With regard to the transportation recommendation from the Funding Commission, I think we were pleased to see that recommendation. It has been a priority of ours to make sure that the students served by our schools are representative of the state. And sometimes transportation can serve as a potential barrier for access for some of our students. And so our hope is that transportation funding would be able to help address that barrier and enable more access to our schools. So I'd say excited to see that recommendation. With regard to special education funding, this is a topic that I know a number of our schools have brought to our attention, and perhaps to your attention as well. What I will say is that we have seen a pretty significant increase in the number of special education students over the last 4 years. We went from about 3,800 students 4 years ago, 3,800 special education students, I should say, to about 5,500 more recently. And unfortunately, the state special education funding allocated to our schools has not kept up with that growth. And so we have been in touch with the Department of Education about some of those concerns and are hopeful that we can work to address that. The result has been a decline in the amount of funding per student or per special education student. And so that has posed some challenges for our schools that go into the school year budgeting. Well, last year we had $3,000 per special education student, and then the numbers come out over the summer, and that number's dropped by $200 or $300 per student. So the impact in terms of budgeting has been, I think, noticeable from our schools.
Assemblywoman, did you have a second question? You had indicated that was it? Okay. Vice Chair Taylor?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the information. I am looking on slide 18 and 19, and thank you for providing the demographic information. It's very helpful as well. And I understand the goal being to mirror that across the state for the schools across the state. But I didn't see this. I see the state numbers reflected on slide 19, but I don't see the state numbers reflected on slide 18. Did I miss that?
Vice Chair Taylor, no, I apologize. Rebecca Fiden for the record. So we were trying to not to squeeze the slides too much. So the numbers on slide 19 reflect the statewide numbers, and so you could use those for comparison, and you could add those bars to the slides on 18 as well. We just were trying not to squish the slide too much. Those bars are getting a little tight. So, for example, on slide 19, the overall statewide population for Asian students is approximately 5.4%. So you could see ours is 8%, so we're slightly overrepresentative in the Asian population. I'd be happy to get you a hard copy that's got all of them included so that you can have it for your reference as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I'd like that for the committee.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ms. Faden, for today's presentation, as well as meeting with me yesterday. I greatly appreciated our conversations. So my question has, it's not really mentioned in here, but it has more to do with some of the other requirements that are in our more traditional public school settings, such as SLOs and SLGs and other requirements of educators. Just wondering if you know offhand some of those differences that allow for then the items that you bring up as a positive towards the charter schools. So in particular, though, the SLOs and SLGs, if they are in fact required in the evaluations, but then also the licensure requirements for your licensed personnel, whether that is a teacher, a counselor, speech language pathologist, et cetera. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Anderson, thank you for the question. Rebecca Fiden for the record. So with regard to your question about the use of the Nevada Educator Performance Framework, our schools are not required to use that model, but some of them choose to. And so they are required to evaluate their teachers, but they may not have to use that specific framework to do so. And so that is one area of flexibility. And I think those of you who kind of know the history of charter schools, the idea was potentially to create some flexibility in the school environment, and that's one place where charter schools do have some flexibility. With regard to your question on teacher licensure, so last session there was a bill that revised the requirements for teacher licensure. Currently 80% of charter school teachers in each school need to be licensed, and the 80% is a little bit may cause like a little bit of very few of our schools are 80%. Maybe that's the best way to put it. Most are significantly more than 80% because there are additional limitations. In addition, all core content area teachers need to be licensed, ELL teachers and special education teachers. And so while in theory it could be as low as 80%, it's rare that you would have a school that would be close to that because of so many of the other requirements for certain categories of teachers. Does that make sense?
It does. And if I may, just to clarify also on the counselor. The counselors and speech language pathologists and other licensed education personnel who are not in the classrooms, are those also required to be licensed, or is that more of a decision of each charter?
Rebecca Fiden for the record. So certainly like a psychologist, anybody who's providing special education services, those types of things, evaluations would. With regard to counselors, I believe they have similar requirements. I'd have to get back to you on that, but typically, we have some schools that have like a dedicated college counselor. That probably falls outside of the typical counseling category, but in terms of someone providing kind of mental health counseling, social work services, those would have to be folks that were licensed.
Thank you, Chair, and also, if the Charter School Authority could do the same thing that I had asked earlier of the school districts and let us know how many openings there are, as we've all recognized in our education world right now, whether we are teachers, administrators, or other areas, there are many openings. So if it is okay with the chair, if you could also provide to the chair the number of openings that are in our charter schools as well, not just our traditional school districts. It'd be great. Thank you, Chair, for that much levity.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions, committee? Oh, I didn't see you on there, Assemblywoman Torres.
I didn't put it on there. I just, I was slacking. I wasn't doing my job. Thank you so much for your presentation, Ms. Fiden, and Mr. Herrick. It's always good to see you. I did have a question. So I know that we're asking for those numbers for charter schools, and it's something that we've done active job tracking. Do you happen to know, like in other traditional schools, and this might be better fitted for the department, whether or not we're tracking the amount of long-term subs in schools, or is that something we only do for public charter schools?
Rebecca Fiden, for the record, Assemblywoman Torres, I know that we have some statistics on the number of substitutes in our school buildings. I couldn't speak to the department's data, but in terms of our schools, we can certainly get some numbers on the number of individuals who are using substitute licenses in the classroom.
Thank you. I know that we do track that information for charter schools. I'm just wondering if the department does that. Do you know, would we be able to get the department up here?
Here she comes.
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Torres. Off the top of my head, I do not believe we collect the long-term subs specifically. We do have vacancy rate, but in some instances within school districts, they will, if there's a vacancy, they may find a long-term sub, and in other instances, they may push all the children to other educators. And so it's hard to sometimes get a true, even if I could get the long-term sub, it's hard to tell how many true vacancies there are once school gets rolling. But we do capture it, at the beginning of the year.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. Great to see you. Okay. We will now move on to our final agenda item, which is public comment. As a reminder, members of the public can provide public comment in person or telephonically and can submit public comment up to 24 hours after the meeting. For those wishing to provide public comment telephonically, instructions for doing so, including the phone number and the meeting ID, can be found on the agenda for today's meeting. That agenda is on Nellis on the Nevada Legislative website. Each person has 2 minutes to provide testimony. Please remember to clearly state and spell your name for the record. Is there anyone here in Carson that wishes to provide public comment? Don't see anybody running towards the chairs. And what about in Las Vegas? Don't see anybody running towards the chairs. Okay, then we will go to BPS. Is there anyone for public comment on the line?
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
We'll give it just 15 seconds or so, just in case. 15 seconds. I need to figure out a song that's 15 seconds long and we can. What? Jeopardy? Oh. Gilligan's Island, I'm hearing. I kind of like the Jeopardy one. BPS, just checking with you again.
The public line is still open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Okay. Then we are going to adjourn. Next meeting will be Tuesday, February 14th, which I know we all know is Valentine's Day, but it's also Molly, my daughter's birthday. So I will be sort of sad that I won't be here with her. I have one personal thing that I want to say really quickly. I just found out that my best friend's son, who is my daughter's best friend, they're the same age, got into Davidson for the profoundly gifted. So, yeah, so I know, so Sawyer. That's it. We are adjourned.